podcast. I'm your host, Ian.
And I'm Alex, also your host.
Hey. All right. So before we get started, let's just talk about the quote of the week real quick. This is a good setup for a really awesome topic that I think we hinted at last time, but it's gonna be a good conversation today. Looking forward to it. So the quote of the week is by Mr. Rose. It only takes 3 generations to wipe out a piece of history. Man.
And if you were wondering, Mr. Rose is a teacher from my high school.
I was about to ask who is Mr. Rose? Are we
He's
all
a
Mr.
cool
Rose?
guy.
Cool. Oh, good to know. Good to know.
Why are you not asking why?
Why is Mr. Rose? What is Mr.
No,
Rose?
I mean, why does it take only 3 generations?
Well, we're about to find out at least partially how that could be true with
Exactly.
Today's topic. So, Alex, I will let you real quick talk about the song of the week, which I really enjoyed, by the way. But I'll let you start.
Wow, that's kind of surprising because it's a little bit like punk pop metal, and it's "Learning to Survive" by We Came as Romans. Now, when I first heard the song, I was like, this is kind of cheesy, but like listening to their production and hearing how well the metal was mastered, I was like, okay, like they're serious, like they're really trying to master their craft.
Yeah.
And so listening to it, I like the second or third time, I actually understood the lyrics a lot more. I was like, okay, this is actually pretty deep, even though it's just like sounds like the song "Crawling in My Skin" or like some other Linkin Park song.
Yeah,
But
they did kind of remind me of like the chorus to like "Thanks for the Memories" or like something like that from Foo Fighters, or not Foo Fighters, but Fall Out Boy. So or Linkin Park, yeah, but yeah, like their message was actually really good. It is like basically don't be afraid to step out of your comfort zone, and at least that's what I got from it, because it's essentially, it sounded like, correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounded like it was more about their struggles.
For sure,
yeah.
And I also like the fact that it's like, even though like we're learning to survive, there are people that are like all betting against you, all saying you're doing the wrong thing, but just learning to survive.
Hey, and that I think that's a very appropriate segue in my
Absolutely.
opinion. So real quick before we jump into the book 1984, which is what we assigned for the rating last week,
By George Orwell.
Yes, by George Orwell. Orwell. I should know that. Orwell. So the definition that we want to bring up real quick is the definition of totalitarianism. So the dictionary definition is, it's a form of government that theoretically permits no individual freedom and that seeks to subordinate all aspects of individual life to the authority of the state. And there are several different ways, of course, that governments in real life have tried to implement it. And the big ones, and this is what we're really going to touch on today, is through surveillance and authority. And as you might imagine, if you somehow can creep into everyday life with mass surveillance and an iron fist, that exploits the concept of a community and a society as a whole. But Alex, why? So I guess before we talk more about the book, why do you think totalitarian governments even try to exercise this much control over people?
To be honest, I think it's because humans are adaptable and they're also malleable. I think it's because totalitarian governments see that there's a variety of exploitations and methods, and it is also just about the easiest way to go to the darker side of morals and ethics. It's a lot easier to take over everything and control it in a bad way than to correctly distribute the powers and have a a productive
Easier.
economy.
Yeah, it's easier if you have that like level of authority, right?
Hmm.
To you don't want to lose. It's just human nature in a lot of ways to not want to lose what control you have over life. So if you're able to somehow control millions of people, why wouldn't you want to give that? Why would you want to give that up? So
Exactly.
yeah. So I'm sure we're going to touch a lot on that today. But so
And just
oh,
to
go ahead.
clarify, sorry, just to clarify, I think that as you were saying earlier, like surveillance and authority was how the totalitarianism was implemented in 1984. But I think that for me personally, reading the book, the scariest, one of the scariest things was whenever O'Brien was explaining why, like, power and why this is, and I don't know. I think we should go over that specifically before we get into either surveillance or authority, because
Okay.
the explanation was a little surprising and also kind of disappointing, because I expected there to be some grand scheme, but it was so direct and
Yeah.
honest.
Yeah.
So
And yeah. Sorry to
no,
cut
go
you
ahead,
off
go
there,
ahead.
but yeah, like so if you read the book, you have Winston, who's the main focus, right? And then you have O'Brien, who is he's the antagonist, the direct human antagonist, I guess. There's several antagonists, it seems like, but he's like the human one, I guess. And he's like the upper echelon, right, of society. And yeah, and I guess leaning on what you just said, it's been years since I've read 1984. I think I read it back in high school, and I forgot that the upper class versus the proletariat, were they called
The proles.
the proles? Yeah, that's what it was. I almost said the prolos, but anyway, the prolos almost lived in like blissful ignorance, right?
Mhm.
They were allowed to essentially, as long as they didn't obviously disobey, they seemingly were happy. But what was really interesting, I think, with O'Brien's like class
Mhm.
structure is that they were self-aware of what was going on. At least it seemed like, and they like indulged in all the things that were outlawed in the book.
Absolutely.
So yeah, I forgot all about that. That's what the upper class was like. I thought for some reason they were all really, really brainwashed, but that wasn't necessarily the case. So
And I'll touch on that later about kind of the classism and the structure inside the book. But why don't you tell us the quote about power?
the quote about power.
Yeah,
Uh, all right. Oh yeah, I had to remember what quote that was, because I was still reeling from the Mr. Rose quote.
yeah.
But so the quote is, the party seeks power entirely for its own sake. We are not interested in the good of others. We are interested solely in power and not wealth or luxury. Ooh, wow. Um, so I remember him talking about that, O'Brien talking about that. Um, yeah, I'm trying to think back, because yeah, there's really is no concept of wealth, is there? Especially for the lower class. You don't own anything.
They don't know any better either. Like
Yeah,
they haven't been exposed.
right.
And it's let's go ahead and let's go through the structure of this book, like the society in this book, because whenever I was reading it, what really struck out to me was whenever Winston described the proles of the proletarians,
Hmm.
because it was strikingly similar to like some standard stereotypes of Americans. Um,
Yeah, I'd agree.
it was talking about how they were only focused on cultural media such as like music
Yeah.
and football and like sports and games and the vices of alcohol, And that was, I was like, dang. But
Yeah, like
to continue, oh, go ahead.
I was just saying, yeah, like they didn't care that they weren't improving themselves because there was nothing else to compare to. So yeah, I agree.
So there's you know there's these things called ministries, which we can equate today to like departments of a
Mhm.
government, and they were all in the shape of a pyramid,
Right.
which I was, whenever I first started, I was wondering like, why a pyramid? Like we got the pyramids of Giza, like all that, but why would a structure like that exist, and why would it be so big? Because it was like measuring something like 1,000 meters tall, like something crazy in the book,
Right.
and that's because it's representative of the class structure. So at the very top, the very tip of the pyramid, we have Big Brother, this
Hmm.
this figure. Then after that, we have the inner circle, the outer circle, the proletarians, and then the natives of the disputed area would be imported as slaves into, whether it was Oceania, Eurasia, whichever
Hmm.
super state
Yeah.
had won the area for the time being.
Hmm.
So going along with that, is classism kind of just inherent in human nature? Because it seems like no matter what we do, we still end up with classes. And is that because of scarcity, or what do you think?
Well, to me, it seems like it's a combination, right? It's a combination of what your environment of your environment, and I think human nature, because there is always, assuming that you're not suffering from a disability or a handicap, rather, right? Assuming you're of, you're able to process things relatively easily from a conscious point of view, and you have two arms, two legs, all that good stuff, right? Able-bodied.
Yeah.
Um, all those disclaimers. Uh, I think that, yeah, I think there will always be a class of some sort in a community. I think there will always be people who don't have as much as other people, in terms of skill, money, whatever that looks like, and stuff. Um, whether or not whether or not you how you got that stuff, or how you're able to acquire those skills, I guess, is the debate, right? Because um, you can argue that could be a certain class, a certain demographic of people that are more oppressed than others, right? Systematically. Um, so I guess, long story short, yeah, I do think that there will always be some sort of level to how much people have compared to other people. It's just, I do think that is a part of us, and our nature.
You think that's because we have a limited amount of resources, or would that disappear if we had an infinite amount of resources?
No, I don't think it would disappear if we had an infinite amount of resources. If anything, I think we get lazier. uh, and I'm not saying that, resources are shared evenly when they're scarce.
Mhm.
But yeah, if you had like everything, like imagine that. Like if you had, let's say you had infinite water and food, which I know is impossible, but let's say you have infinite water and food. Like, what would be the incentive to farm, or work on a farm when someone else is already doing it for you, and you'll always have food or water, or
Mhm.
those are the basics, but like whatever, right? Yeah, that's a good
Yeah,
question. Yeah, it's a good question.
I agree with you. But
No,
the thing
no.
with totalitarian, oh my gosh, that's a hard one to say. The thing
Mm,
with totalitarianism is like, it's tried to exist in many different forms, and I think 1984 has found the most complete and comprehensive system.
mhm.
Because,
Yeah.
and we'll get into this later, because even the dissenters are converted. Like they don't even let martyrs exist. Like they
Mm,
actually convert the dissenting opinions, and it's a really scary idea, because you don't even have the chance to die with what you believe.
No, not at all. Yeah, because you're always being watched. And I guess if we want to go and talk about it, you want
Let's
to
do
talk?
it.
Yeah, let's talk about surveillance because that's a great point. Because if you're always being monitored, then you'll never even have a chance to think differently, right? Because you're always living in fear. So yeah, it's a horrible concept in my opinion. But
It,
so in the book,
so
yeah. So I guess we can just jump into in the book like how they handle surveillance. Do you want to start us out?
yeah, I'll talk about and just in context, like whenever they're writing this, internet didn't exist, phones
Mhm.
didn't exist, none of the computer. Don't think like personal computer definitely didn't exist, but um, it was interestingly enough, he George Orwell had this idea of a telescreen, which is like essentially like a computer that's attached to a television, like an in-place television.
Yeah.
Um, and these were everywhere. Like all the homes were lined with them. It was just about it was just about in every public and private setting. And also they had microphones. Whenever Winston went to like this forest with Julia, she was talking about how she knew a place where there were no microphones set up. And
Mhm.
then we have the thought police. That is something
Definitely.
very very chilling. So the thought police can, enforce the laws and regulations to the point of any type of action, subversive action. And along with that, you also have the tips that go to the thought police. So like one of Winston's coworkers, or not coworkers, actually neighbors, Parsons,
Mhm.
he was
Right.
put in jail by the thought police because his own daughter gave a tip about
Yeah.
him descending.
Yeah. It all comes down to like you can't escape the system. Like
Mm,
at least in as far as I know in most societies, even in places like China, at least there's somewhere you can escape, right?
yep.
To at least think a little differently. But in this world, I mean, there's nowhere to go. There's nowhere to go.
Mhm.
So, and before, well, I guess we talk a little bit more about it. I wanted to bring up like the concept of the ministries, like the ministry of love, the ministry of
Yeah, for
truth,
sure.
the ministry of there's ministry
Plenty.
of plenty. Yeah, those are it's like the craziest ironies in the world because
Hmm.
because the ministry of love is law and punishment, right? And
Hmm.
then yeah, the ministry of truth is essentially brainwashing. um
Yep.
yeah, and so it's just it struck me as really funny that they were essentially the polar opposite of what they claim to be. So
Exactly. And the book states that all of the ministries had, the three party slogans:
mhm.
ignorance is strength, war is peace, and oh, what's the last one?
um let me look at my notes here.
Oh, is freedom is slavery? Is that it?
I think yeah, freedom is slavery, something like that. Yeah, I believe so. And they each like corresponded to the different departments or
Exactly.
ministries. Yeah. So yeah.
And to go specifically with the Ministry of Love, or as it's like the short form, Mini Love,
Mhm.
um, it enforces loyalty to Big Brother through fear, buttressed through a massive apparatus of security and repression, as well as systematic brainwashing. And
Right.
I gotta tell you, if you can't die with what you believe in, then what's the point of existing?
I'm with you there. Well, yeah, or at the very least, if you can't die knowing that uh your existence is unique, or like
Mhm.
your mind is unique, or like or no one can look inside your head. Yeah, like well, why live? I know it sounds depressing, but why even exist? So
It's
um
rough.
yeah, and in the book with surveillance, is it didn't wasn't it where you essentially were in a box, like you weren't exposed to any like windows or any really major openings like that had reflection, like mirrors.
Yeah,
Um,
and that was like such a, and I know he borrowed some of the stuff from like his time, like World War II and whatnot.
mhm,
But like that's like so scary because you lose your sense of day and night, then you lose your sense of self, and then you lose your sense of like time itself.
right.
Like all of those things coming together, like no windows, no mirrors, and no clocks. Like it kind of just it literally not necessarily literally, but like metaphysically takes you out of your exist like your mindset
Hmm.
and that's I believe that's exactly what they were trying to do because it was part of the conversion therapy,
Right.
and they were eventually gonna like not exist because they would be killed later, like they would be vaporized later,
Mm-hmm.
and it's almost like they stopped your existence even before you were killed, which is
Yeah, because you had nothing to live for, so like you're
mhm.
kind of already dead. um, which is haunting.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm trying to think what else struck out to me with the ministry of love. Sorry, ministry of love. Um, because yeah, like throughout the book, no matter where Winston and Julia, who the girl he loved at one point, went, no matter where they went, they were always being watched, even though they thought they were alone. Like when they went back to her apartment, right?
Yep.
Uh,
And the picture that they looked at turned out to be like just a veil, and then there's a telescreen behind it.
yeah, like that, and none of it, it was all that was that. Oh yeah, that's what struck out to me. Like even the stuff that was considered banned or taboo,
Mhm.
whether it be like old school like 20th century stuff, like memorabilia, like even that stuff, like they knew about that. The ministry knew about that. Big Brother knew about all that.
Yeah, and they were keeping it in control because the antique store's owner was the thought police. That was
Right.
what really like because it really surprised me because they had actually all control, even the good
Mhm.
and the bad, and it was such an extensive system. Like that was crazy.
Yeah, there at least from the book's point of view, there really were no cracks in that system. It seemed like
Mhm.
anyway. Which man, yeah, that part is like, oh man, there was like a little glimmer of hope, but no, they took it away. They took it away from
Got
me.
crushed,
Yeah. So
which
yeah.
I think is the symbolism for that glass paperweight with like the piece of coral in the middle because
Mhm.
it gets smashed whenever the thought police sabotage them or
Right.
not. Yeah, so and with the surveillance, it was really interesting because it it kind of destroys the self.
Hmm.
Winston was always worried, like even just the faintest accidental smile or look to the telescreen could pick it up, and you could be marked.
Yeah. Yeah. Like any emotion
Mhm.
other than what they wanted you to be. Yeah, that was haunting, like I said earlier. And so I guess going back to the antique store owner, let's talk. I guess let's. You want to just go and talk about like the scale of authority that the
Yeah.
system had in this book? Yeah, cool. So I guess I'll start out real quick. So when Orwell was dealing with authority or the concept of it in 1984, he came up with the Ministry of Truth, which we mentioned earlier, or mini true, where essentially any and all information, whatever that may look like, was administered through this ministry, right? And so what was deemed correct, what was deemed incorrect, um, was essentially filtered to match whatever Big Brother wanted, um, or whatever that was needed for the society to keep going, right? So, Alex, for me, I totally forgot about this, but I forgot about the concept of like memory holes. where you erased any and all existence of what was old knowledge, old information. I totally forgot that they did that in the book.
Yeah, and like you drop a piece of paper and it gets shot down into an incinerator, and it just didn't
Yeah.
exist anymore because they had such control. And I think that like the most important function of this totalitarian regime was to control the information through this ministry, because the information is really what hindered everyone from progressing against it, as well as
Yeah.
it's a bottleneck also on this regime, because O'Brien is talking about how like they are, whenever he's interrogating and converting Winston, he's talking about how they actually control thoughts and memories because they control all the information, and things and because of that they have complete power because they get to write history. Like instead of the Wright brothers creating the plane, like Big Brother created the plane. Like they had
Right.
complete control, and the information is truly what keeps us in place, what keeps us sane is memories of information. Because if we have I think that it could almost be categorized as like a mental disorder if you don't have any memories, or if you keep losing them, like you lose just about everything that anchors you to your consciousness and your sense of self.
Yeah, and it seems to me like this ministry, the ministry of truth, is like the most powerful of the three in a lot of ways, because it's the one that you interact with the most. I feel like, which is, obviously your memories, what you read, what you see, what you consume, right? And so if somehow there was some powerful force out there that could control all of that, I mean, they can control everything about you at that point. So yeah, and I don't know, like what in your mind struck what struck you the hardest when they were talking about newspeak, which essentially newspeak, if you need a refresher, it limits the whatever vocabulary or terminology that you're reading or hearing. But what stood out to you the most in the book, if you remember, with newspeak?
I think it was the idea to eliminate all of the words that kind of represent bad or like or evil. I thought that was interesting because they the point of newspeak is to whittle down language so much to where, because our language is like is the basis for our thoughts, right? So they're trying to make language in a form that you could not express bad things. You could only express it in like good, but opposite.
It was safe. Yeah, exactly. Like it was
like instead of saying bad, they would have to say ungood.
Yeah, I'm laughing, but yeah, that's true. Like, yeah, anything negative had to be a positive somehow.
Exactly.
Yeah, because
it's like I think it's ironic also, because the Ministry of Truth was so efficient in what they were doing. Like they like to have the complete control. They were involved with just about every facet of society. Like inside the Ministry of Truth, they had all kinds of like inside the ministry, they had departments ranging from like music all the way to porn. Like they were controlling everything, and they were efficient with it. And for them to also utilize newspeak was an interesting fact, because if you remember, they hadn't necessarily converted everyone to newspeak. They were still working on like the third or fourth version of it, something like that, to get the whole entire newspeak dictionary together. But they were pushing it through the media of the society.
Right. Yeah, because there was an idea of old speak, which is like what the older generations still knew, but I guess like with old speak, I get, like we were just talking about, it had negative connotations. Something could be bad or evil or wrong. But that's where the propaganda arm came through, because if you made them shred what they used to remember, they're going to forget after a while what they used to remember, right? I mean, you need a refresher every once in a while. So I think that's what Winston was talking about too, right? Because he thought he recalled some point in history where there wasn't a war, or no, sorry, where there was a war, but it was like different.
It was a different super state.
Right. But he couldn't remember because it had been so long since he heard about it. So, and that was due to, I'm sure, to the Ministry of Truth rewriting history. So, that's a chilling thought to not only like forget, but to not only forget like what you remembered, but to like doubt yourself every step of the way because you see this new information that's come out. Like that talk about feeling completely helpless, like
Yeah, exactly. I got a question for you. They have this idea of new speak, old speak. We have old English. I remember whenever I was in high school, I was reading Beowulf, and like it was one of those really cool books where it was written during like the medieval times, I believe, and it was written in Old English. So on the left hand side of the page, you had the Old English version, and on the right hand side, you had like the English we're used to.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that we've lost meaning or or descriptions of like feelings, or do you think that the English we are using now has expanded or reduced our ability to communicate?
I think we don't use enough. Well, I'm guilty of this. I don't think we use enough vocabulary that is available out there anymore. It's very simple English, I think, that a lot of people use now. And I think we're in danger of losing a lot of words that could be more descriptive. Like I know I use the word very, for example, like way too much. Instead of like saying something that's very good, I could say like something is fantastic. I don't know. And I know that's like a watered down example, but like, yeah, no, I definitely think we're dumbing down at least the English language for sure, to make it simpler, easier to digest. But that's not always a good thing because you can't always accurately describe how you're feeling anymore if you don't have a more like expansive vocabulary. So I think we are.
I agree.
I think we are kind of in a weird spot, especially like in the last like 50, 60 years, I would think. So,
and it seems like our breadth and depth of language has been sacrificed for speed and understanding, like especially abbreviations like LOL, laugh out loud. That's been abbreviated for both speed and understanding. But I mean, maybe we don't need to speak faster. Maybe the problem with conversations and discussions is that we're always trying to put our idea out there as fast as possible. Like I think that's why social media might be so pervasive and so easy to exploit human nature, is that we're trying to communicate and we're trying to do it as fast as we can. Like just type it out, tweet it, don't think about it, don't think it through before you tweet it. Like,
yeah, because you can theoretically say whatever you want as much as you want, even if you haven't formed the thought very well, or if it's your opinion sounds stupid, for lack of a better word. You can say all you want online, and you don't always have consequences, and so you don't want to improve how you're delivering information if you can just say what you want. So yeah, I totally agree with what you're saying, for sure.
Do you think that there will ever be a universal language? Because I've been thinking about this. I don't know if you heard about this weird rock. Like it's like a post doomsday thing, where a post apocalypse thing, where they have this rock that's been engraved with like recommendations. Like it's been controversial because one of the recommendations is to keep the population less than 500 million. But I believe good luck with that. But I believe that one of the suggestions for for the next society after an apocalypse is to have a universal language.
Oh, after the apocalypse.
Yeah, like it's
Oh.
like an instruction manual almost for that the next generation.
I don't know. I think, well, to be fair, I mean, if you look around, like it's either what is it, English, Chinese, Hindi, or Spanish. Those are the big ones,
Yeah.
right? So,
Mhm.
but it's still not a universal language, even though a lot of people have learned those languages. I don't know. That's a tough one, man, because like there are a lot of people. That's an understatement. There are a lot of people in this world. There's thousands of different cultures, and to have them all get along under one roof with a universal language, I don't know. It would have to take a world power, right? It would have to take
Mhm.
kind of what we're talking about here, a super state, to enforce a language that everyone has to read. Because even in like places like China or Japan or India, wherever, they're still the most comfortable with their native language, I would assume, right? So
Absolutely, that's what they think in.
yeah. So I think it would take a lot of, I think it would take like a super state almost to enforce like a required, like this is the language you have to learn, whatever it is.
Mhm.
So I don't think it would be that easy, to be honest.
I feel like it might it might also be impossible just because there's all the culture and the history behind a language, which
Mhm.
to get past those barriers is going to be tapping a lot of red buttons for most people.
Right. Yeah, because you lose. I mean, I get not everyone cares too much about genealogy and stuff,
Mhm.
but you do lose a bit of who you are and your connection to your past or your family if you completely wipe out someone's language like that, right? Um,
Yeah,
so yeah.
I also find it kind of surprising. Like we've been around here for like 2,000 years and then more, and we still have so much of the human population segmented because of language.
Oh, for sure. Even with like colonization,
Hmm.
which brought in French, English, Portuguese, and did I say Spanish? I forgot.
You didn't say Spanish. Yeah.
Spanish, yeah. The big ones, like even then, you still have dialects, you still have like evolutions of the language. Even if you completely take over a place, that native population, if you didn't wipe them out, uh, would adapt it to fit their culture.
Mhm.
Like in Haiti, for example, you have like French Creole.
Exactly. Yeah.
So or Louisiana or I think French Canada is a little different. It's more European, from what I understand. But
Hmm.
um,
Especially Quebec. The French always make fun of Quebec.
oh really?
Yeah, their accents and stuff.
See, that's what I mean too. Like culture tends to not evolve and change depending on where you are, and even if you could, yeah, completely colonize somewhere, you're still going to have people who branch off, right? Because you need that sense of community. And so all that being said, I think it would be extremely difficult to have, yeah, a universal language. That when you what would you what would sorry what would you do you have any other thoughts on that, as far as
I
like?
think the way you just described it, like the dialects, the accents, and then the nuances in between, it seems almost like an evolutionary problem of humans because you pass your language down to the next
Right.
generation, and if you have a different style than the standard, it's gonna go along with your children. So
Hmm.
maybe the problem is not always about the universal language, but to have a language that can that has room for enough differentiation and like the dialects and the tongues,
Right.
because India, like India has something crazy like 300 languages within, but they're still able to govern, and
Wow.
and I think that's because they have the main language of Hindi. Like
Mhm.
my grandparents, on my dad's side, they are from India, and they can speak 2 or 3 languages,
Wow.
like Hindi, Telugu, and they have that Hindi just as a utility to understand the main language. If I think that's also very interesting is whenever people understand more than one language, they can parse out meaning that might be between the lines even better, because you see the different mechanisms for
Right.
explaining things.
Yeah, and I think, yeah, in the book, I think Orwell kind of tackles that, because
Mhm.
he made it clear, like, yeah, we're not going to have a newspeak, in a year. It sounded like in the book it took generations to even get to that point.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying it's not possible, because if you did have, God forbid, an overarching authority like that, and like in the book, I could see it happening eventually. If they're really focused on making sure everyone speaks the way they want them to speak. But I don't know, in the current world, yeah, it just doesn't seem possible to me right now anyway. But
And it's a shame because so much, like with the internet and information, the
mm,
we could understand much more. I truly believe we would be able to solve a lot of problems, not like world hunger or anything, but like a lot of like scientific or sociological, like a lot of problems, because we have such a wide net of information if it was all one language.
do you think it's because it's too much information on the internet, and we kind of feel like maybe, if we just maybe because there's so much stuff out there, maybe we just we feel more comfortable if we, interact with people in our own country or our own language. Maybe, I don't know, there could be something to that.
Yeah, there is like a massive aggregation of data, and with that, you only have like so much bandwidth. Like humans, like the amount of content uploaded to YouTube in a day would take like 200 years or something crazy like that to
Yeah.
watch. So I can only imagine, like, maybe these segmented parts of information and language exist to kind of create a hierarchy of what's important, like a priority queue almost.
That's fair. Yeah, I mean, yeah, we have literally everything about us, that we could ever want to
Mm-hmm.
understand, on the internet. But yeah, I don't think we take full advantage of it. I certainly don't.
Well, I don't either. It's a huge
So
plot hole for humanity, I think.
it's the biggest plot hole to ever exist, this timeline. But yeah, I'm with
Moving
you.
on, what, like with Ministry of Truth, I also found it scarily close to the news organizations and mainstream media we have today, like, because they're all about like optics, like how does this look and how can we throw a spin on it.
Right.
Like, I mean, you have Fox News far right, you have CNN far left. You could see the same story on both of them, and it could be like a completely different
Yeah.
situation in each of them, based, and they all refer to facts and whatnot, but the way they present it, the way they manipulate the information, to have a certain perspective, for you to have a certain perspective as you're reading it, like that's almost like been exaggerated to a point where in this book 1984, the information actually holds no value because it's always constantly changed. It's always
hmm
replenished with a different form. Like you never get to grasp any information because
Right.
it's going to change.
And I think, yeah, and that, in a lot of ways, especially with the internet, at least online media,
Mhm.
man, the problem is there's so much information that doesn't even matter, I think, online. That, yeah, a lot of it, like, they're obviously around celebrities and stuff, that's been around forever, but
Mhm.
just things that don't matter, like top 10, like, those listicles, like, it's
Oh
like,
gosh.
but seriously, like, that's, easy to digest and they know it.
Mhm.
So that's what we'll gravitate to first, even if it has like no meaning. Or we'll just gravitate to like a reaction piece, like you were saying, like with optics, where there's maybe something serious going on, but we immediately form an opinion based on what we're being told, and we don't think about it anymore, and we just move on. So that's dangerous. That's it, and I think we all get caught up in that to some degree because media is so powerful.
Absolutely. And I mean, that's why we're always battered with critical thinking. You need to do more critical thinking like that. I mean, it's true. It's very true.
Yeah, definitely.
And with authority, like they had control of information, but I also think that another thing that might not have been emphasized as much in the book was the movement or travel of citizens. Like that, when you restrict someone to a place, like it's always interesting to me, like someone that lives in a city and someone that lives in like a small town, like if they never leave that town, how much of the world do you think they actually understand? How much of culture and society? Like I think that the more interaction you have, the obviously the more knowledge you'll get. But with the citizens of Airstrip One as part of Oceania, like maybe even like for them, they don't even know, like they might not even know where they are.
They might not even be in London for all we know.
For real.
Yeah, and I think that definitely applies to the real world too. Like if you live in middle of nowhere USA, and you only know what you see in media or online, right? So that's a very dangerous place to be in, because then I mean, all of your perceptions of the world are based on just what others are telling you. So, man, yeah, you got to get out there a little bit and travel if you can.
Absolutely.
So,
I'm a huge proponent of traveling, as you might have
clearly. I wouldn't have guessed, but yeah, definitely. And go ahead.
Do you think this restriction of travel is like more than intentional, like to where it's just how a totalitarian government can keep a whole society in order?
It depends on, I guess, how it's marketed, right? Like it's dangerous to go anywhere. We'll protect you. Like if it's that kind of mentality, for sure. I guess it just kind of depends on like what angle they're going with, right? Like in terms of restricting it. But how about you? What do you think?
I think as we mentioned last week, like whenever we're talking about horses like being almost like a net, it's like horses were a network of information, like travel, like mail and whatnot. With movement and travel, it's gotta be that, honestly.
Yeah.
That's just the best way to keep a society in order, is to restrict them.
I agree. I mean, if you travel, if you go around too much, if you assuming your society, whatever society you have, isn't really free, like you don't have freedom of information as a right, why would your government want you to look at the other side and see what's out there? For sure.
I agree.
Yeah. So with that, I know we touched on it just a minute ago, but do we want to kind of break down this society that 1984 has built up, just to kind of bring it all home and try to really see from a 5,000 level view or 5,000 foot view what it's actually like?
I agree.
Cool. So you were talking earlier about the pyramid, right? And it's from what I understood in the book anyway, it was very rigid. You had Big Brother at the top, right? Then you had the inner circle, which is essentially the leadership. And then you had the outer circle, which were like the enforcers and like O'Brien was he in the inner circle or the outer
He
circle?
was inner circle,
That's right.
but he went in and met with Winston as a outer circle member.
That's what it
No,
was.
no. He was with the outer circle, but Winston knew he was an inner circle member. I think that's what it was.
Okay. I got that swapped. Okay.
Yeah, because the first time Winston interacts or mentions and talks about O'Brien and Julia was at a 2 Minutes of Hate.
Yeah, which we'll talk about in just a sec.
Yeah.
And then so you had Big Brother, the inner circle, the outer circle, the proletarian or the prolos. Proles. Oh my god, I don't know why I can't. Anyway, and then you had the natives, which are basically slaves. So there was from what I gathered, and I think it's right. Big Brother, and the circles were very, very small part of the overall society. They're like 5% of the total population.
Yep.
So then everyone else was essentially completely powerless and
clueless
and completely clueless. Absolutely. Which I like to think we're nowhere near that yet in the West, but I mean, if we don't pay attention.
Yeah, I mean,
I don't know.
It's gonna get there.
Yeah, I'm worried about that for sure. But in the book, anyway, the proletarian were completely living in blissful ignorance for the most part, because what didn't the circles, at least the inner circle, if I remember right, like distribute like free alcohol, free porn, free just all these vices to keep them satiated. Because they outlawed, if I remember right, they outlawed sex, right? Completely.
Yes, well, except for
reproduction.
Except for furthering the party, as they said.
Right, which is kind of, to me, an oxymoron. Like you can't get any pleasure out of conceiving, but you still have to conceive. Like, okay.
and when you go against the rules, you're left feeling even like more shameful and less deserving.
Right, which that's awful.
Yeah.
To say the least. But and then finally, I would say, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the biggest distinction between the groups was knowledge or education.
Yeah.
And from what I remember, the circles they were in the know, like they knew what was actually going on, but at least you got hints of that in the book. But I wonder if they actually knew the timeline, or do you think they were somewhat brainwashed too?
I think that the way this was set up was, you have this minority of the inner circle, like maybe 2% of the population, and then you have the outer circle, which is like maybe like another 5 or like 8%. And it was in such a way where the inner circle didn't need to worry about the proletarians or the natives. They only had to focus on the outer circle, and because of this, I believe that the outer circle was aware. I mean, Winston was aware, and Julia certainly was, and this awareness was like also at the same time, it was part of this ideology of doublethink, where it's two opposites that work together to mean the same thing in a way that doesn't make sense. They were aware, but they weren't aware at the same time. So I think that both the outer circle and the inner circle had access to education and information, but with the inner circle, they had more control and authority.
Right. Yeah, and they really had no incentive to leak it, I'm sure, like ever, because they would lose that power. So like no one felt like they had to be a hero, you know, to like to tell everybody, hey, this is actually what happened. Like, why would you do that?
Mhm.
So
Let's
yeah,
go. Let's go ahead and go to like now. You want to start comparing and contrasting
sure.
because I mean we kind of went over it and we talked about it briefly, but like this is a fictional book, and I think the one thing that Orwell got wrong, and this is just like because of his timing, like he was used to world powers that were so centralized that were, and because of that, I think that you might have not seen the efficiency of dispersed and segmented powers. Like, for example, news media, even in propaganda countries, they have like plenty of different forms and versions. Like,
Hmm.
but they still print out the same stuff.
That's true. And I think even more, at least recently, it seems like private companies seem to have more influence over people than governments do, at least in the US,
Mhm.
like in big tech companies specifically. So yeah, it's not necessarily just the government that has all the authority and all the control anymore. So um, uh, yeah, and with the Ministry of Truth, I mean, obviously, I'm sure everyone could compare it to the internet to a degree, right? And how quickly misinformation can be spread, um, or just a spin on it. So uh, I was thinking about that. Like, what do you think? Do you think it's a common the Ministry of Truth is, if you could compare it to today, is like a combination of the internet, the government, or do you think it's mostly relegated to one place in our society?
I think that it's got to be a mixture because we have the journalists, we have the historians, we have the people that write what will be seen in the next generation and the generations to come, and then we have like the actuality of it.
Right.
So it really depends because for us, we almost we have a power that previous generations didn't, which was we have access to the internet where we can actually start our own like historical website where it has information and facts. But along with that, I think that the biggest problem with the internet is certainly the fact that it's cost based and you can get deplatformed
Right.
and all this other things. So it's hard to say because the Ministry of Truth had such complete control, and I think that we do have some control, but it's limited,
Mhm.
and what we know is truly just what we were given.
Right. Right. And yeah, I mean, you can only go off of your own opinions so much before you're influenced by somebody else. No, that's very true. And I guess moving on to the Ministry of Love. Uh, so obviously, I think you in our notes here, you brought up the NSA, which is a great point. I mean, that's been a high profile one for several years now at this point, where they have a lot of surveillance over what you're doing, and potentially your activities online, and they don't have to be like malicious or anything, but you could be theoretically punished for it if they went after you. And but I got a kind of a question for you, kind of in relation to that for the Ministry of Live. Sorry, I'll stop doing that. But
Oh my gosh, it's that you're so good at it too.
thank you. I lost my train of thought. Oh yeah. So for the Ministry of Love, what do you think ultimately that I think in a lot of ways we want to police ourselves on and we want to have a system where we want to cancel people. We want to make them feel like they should be punished if they mess up at all, like in the real world or online. So do you think in some respects, just with how much information can be passed around now, that we kind of are our own ministry of love, if that makes sense?
I see what you're saying for sure. That is because as humans, we have the capacity to regulate what we believe, and I mean, you could be told that like 2 + 2 = 5, and it's depending on how you take that, as if you take it as truth or if you take it as just absurdity.
Right.
So I think that your comparison and where you're getting at is true, because we have this idea of postmodernism where everybody has a truth, like there's this new thing like in colleges where you speak your truth, like your experiences and what you say about them is a truth because it's what you feel, what you think. But the problem with truth is like truth is defined as anything that corresponds to reality. So you have a perspective problem when it comes to truth.
Right. And yeah, in a lot of ways, it sometimes feels like we're our own big brother, because we want to punish other people who don't agree with us very quickly, and we don't give them a chance to even defend themselves sometimes,
And so we want to appease our own like political camp or our own ideology.
Bubble. Right, exactly. Like our own little bubble. So yeah. And I think that kind of ties along with we briefly talked about it a minute ago, but what the 2 minutes of hate were in the book. Do you want to go over that real quick?
Sure. So the 2 minutes of hate in the book was a social program where everyone would be together and they would be given pictures of the enemy, and kind of like almost a promotional piece to hate and attack and throw out slurs, like just express your disgust and your hatred outwardly.
Right. And what was funny was like the guy in the book, I think what was his last name? Goldstein?
Oh, Goldstein.
Yeah. We don't even know if he was real. That was the that was the crazy part. But yeah, like it was this session they did, I think every morning, or every day at least, where they just let it all out, like everything, all their demons out on this guy that may not even be real. And I don't know, man. It seems like, especially, I know we keep talking about online, but that sure seems like
happens.
It happens a lot with anyone that like may or may not even have like messed up, or like maybe is deemed controversial. We immediately just want to go out and cancel them, just get rid, like make them feel like they're completely worthless, and then we move on to the next one.
Exactly.
So yeah, I definitely do think in a lot of ways we do have that 2 minutes of hate, but just all the time.
Yep.
Yeah. So it's dangerous,
and
though.
It's easy because, like, for humans, we just need a figure to be poised on a stand and just a couple of small facts for us to be like, that guy is screwing up my life.
Yeah, and it may not always be true because I don't know. It seems like we don't want to look at the human side of things first and see, okay, maybe we can cut them a little slack. Maybe they weren't actually maybe they aren't actually terrible. I don't know. I guess it depends on the situation, but I think we're way too reactionary.
Do you think, though, that the 2 minutes of hate is a good function for people, like, because almost to me it feels like we have a need as humans to outwardly express an inward struggle, whether that's through working out, through boxing, through wrestling, through
For sure.
verbal conversations.
Oh yeah, definitely. No, I definitely think so. But there's a healthy balance to it, I think. Because
Mhm.
if you like the figurative example, I guess, where you have like a Coke bottle and you shake it up and it explodes, right? That's not healthy. If you have like these just extreme like outbursts, like where you just go on a violent or just at least rampage, right? Like that's not good for your psyche. Like you need to vent your frustrations, your stress out in a healthy way, and preferably not at other people. So um, yeah, I definitely think like stuff like working out and um, exercise. I think exercise actually helps a lot with all of that. To
Absolutely.
be honest, so
Very good regulator
I
for your
agree
hormones and whatnot.
for sure.
Mental state, I guess. Also, well, one question is, if we had the 2 minutes of hate and it was someone like Gold Goldstein, where he might not even be real, would that be a bad thing? If it was, if what we were hating, if what we were expressing doesn't even exist in
Oh,
actuality.
oh, for sure. Because um, that just means, well, one, we're all completely being fooled by something,
Mm-hmm.
right? And we didn't even know it, which is in itself is scary. And two, we're just hating to hate, and
Yeah,
we're it's not even justified. Yeah, so that's all sorts of bad.
I agree.
So
I agree.
um, unless you had another topic to bring up, I think it's time for a commercial break. What do you think?
Oh yeah, let's go.
All right. So,
I'm
well,
excited.
I
I'm really excited.
yeah, for what I had this week was
Mhm.
is it from the ground? Is it from plants or is it from trees?
Tell me.
All right. So you ready? All right. So where do you think an eggplant comes from? Talking about the Ministry of Love. uh,
Oh man. Let's see. Hmm. I'm gonna say it's like
keep in mind, it's
from a
big.
bush, from a bush or a plant.
Actually, you were right. Yeah, you're right.
Really?
Yeah, because at first I thought eggplants came from trees, like big trees. But
Eggplant trees?
yeah, I thought so, man. So yeah, I looked at pictures. I'm like, wait a minute. They're like little eggplant plants. So I was like, okay, I guess I was wrong this whole time. So man, you guessed that quick. All right, what do you got for?
Had to be.
I know. What do you got for me?
All right. This one I think you're gonna guess, hopefully.
Okay,
Asparagus.
wouldn't that also be a plant?
Does it come from the ground, a plant, or a tree?
I think from a plant. I think from a plant. It's like green beans, right?
It is from the ground.
No way. It's actually from the ground.
So asparagus grows straight up out of the ground as skinny individual stalks.
Hmm. So you could argue it could be a tree.
A mini tree.
A mini tree.
But, and listen to this. This was actually really cool. As it gets taller, asparagus will start to develop fern-like leaves and toxic red berries.
No way.
Yeah.
I didn't know. I thought it was like a bean or something like that.
No, it's like little mini trees coming up out of the ground.
A, a potentially deadly little mini tree. Huh. Well, I learned something today. Yours was way more interesting than mine. I thought you'd have a harder time with the eggplant. All right. This is
Wait,
an. Oh, go ahead.
real quick. You know the reason why I knew it couldn't have been a tree
Why?
is because probably one of the funniest jokes would deal with like walking and then getting hit by an eggplant falling down a tree.
You're not wrong. Yeah, it would be up there with like coconuts or something. Yeah, that's true. um, so this is a new one that we came up with, or you came up with rather. It's called interview time, which I think it's a cool idea because essentially it's like a little mock interview question. And it's a good way, hey, if you're looking for a job or if you're trying to brush up on your resume, hey, why not have a little practice in the meantime, right?
Let's do it.
I like it. You want to hit me up with your question first?
Sure.
Right.
Hold on.
Oh, right. I need to have a suit and but it's virtual, so I'd have boxers on too. So,
Mr. Charles, sir, why should we hire you?
Ooh. All right. Well, I don't know what your company is, sir. If I'm being honest.
We are a food packaging company.
Or food packaging company. And may I ask what the position is for?
The position is for the software engineering and CAD modeling.
And what would I be doing while as a software engineer for this food company?
You would be modeling the devices, the actual hardware devices that would do the packaging, as well as programming the robotics behind it.
Okay. Well, I appreciate the explanation on the job that I had no idea existed.
If you were to have asked one more question, I would have fired you, even though you weren't hired.
Oh, well, yeah, I didn't even know your company until 5 seconds ago, so apologies for that. So why should I be hired? So I've had a considerable variety of experiences in and out of the office. I have potentially, I have over the past 2 years traveled across multiple states, remote working to help solve complex issues that we've discovered mostly through application programming. So it involves C++ and Python. And a lot of the times, we have had to work on different platforms. For example, where I was at before in Oklahoma, we had outdated software drivers, but we didn't realize that. So we had to fly out to California to make sure that we were up to date with their systems, because we were testing their systems with our target hardware. So in other words, I feel like I'm a great fit for this particular company because I have experience in a variety of different use cases where I can utilize C++ and Python on several different kinds of platforms. So that I think that I'm a great fit in that regard, because it takes a lot of different approaches to a particular problem that you may have never even uncovered before. So
that's good stuff. Actually, just on the spot, that's pretty good, because you took the position and you explained how you have a lot of experience in the programming side, which directly corresponds, like your programming did directly correspond to physical and hardware. So it's good stuff. I will be honest, that one, if someone asked me why should we hire you, I would just take my resume and just walk out. Like, that's such a hard question to answer.
Yeah, and at least, so disclaimer, if y'all are looking for jobs out there, I haven't actually run across a lot of people who have asked that question. Have you? Like, directly?
Okay, so for the internship I got last summer, I was asked, why do you want this position? Which is kind of along the same lines. And I didn't know how to answer, so I started off with as a joke. If you remember last year, we were having a bad economic crisis due to COVID. So I said, well, first of all, I would like to commit to the GDP of America because I love this country and I believe in it. And that got the ball rolling. He really liked that, and he thought it was funny. And I was like, hey, I'm getting hired as soon as he left.
Yeah, and normally I don't like to talk too much about like how awesome I am. You kind of have to like show it. So yeah, that's a great way of answering that question, because you're not just talking about yourself, you're talking about what you actually done. So that's smart. All right, I got one for you.
Oh boy.
And this time you don't even need to know like what position you're applying for. You could be
All right.
working at a hair salon and you didn't
At
even know it,
McDonald's.
or McDonald's. Yeah, I dumped all my money into crypto.
And now look at me flipping
Yeah.
patents.
Oh man. Okay. Tell me about a time you had to step up as a leader at work.
Mm, I like this. So whenever I was working at a grocery store and I was part of the produce department, I noticed that we were having a problem because I would close at night. I noticed that there was a rat problem, which is a really big violation for the food safety of grocery stores.
Right.
And I noticed it, noted it. Then I told someone the next day, some of my coworkers, and I was like, I was just starting off like, yeah, that's a problem. I was like, hey, we're kind of serving food to people. Like, this is important. And from there, I put it up the totem pole to the assistant manager of the produce department, whatever. And he went and got some mouse traps. And he got this is terrible. He got the glue traps, and
Oh yeah.
and guess what?
What?
Apparently the rat was a female and it had babies, and there was like 3 tiny rats with their fur stuck on the glue trap. It was I saw it and I was like, oh, that sucks for whoever has to deal with that.
Well,
And
way to step up as a leader.
yeah, that was a terrible answer. I'm not getting tired, but yeah, I don't like definitely. I definitely have a better one now that I'm thinking about it. I definitely have a better one.
Yeah, go for it. Why not? Take two.
So take two. So at my last internship, we had a goal of doing an upgrade with our Kubernetes clusters, as well as the corresponding Rancher clusters, and we're getting a couple done. Like each of the Terraform modules were getting upgraded as well, and because of how diverse and segmented the development teams are, it was taking a lot of different people to work on this, as well as to communicate and also organize these upgrades.
Mm-hmm.
So I just took it upon myself to actually handle a lot more than I was supposed to, and just like got it done.
That is a great answer, because that promotes independent thinking, but at the same time, you were wanting to help out your fellow coworkers without bossing them around. That's also a trap I think a lot of people have when they want to take a leadership role, is that they want to manage people but not help them. So that's a good answer. I like that one.
I appreciate it.
Yeah. So I guess moving on from our commercial breaks, Alex, we got some exciting stuff to talk about as far as content that's coming up, right?
Yes. So because we have our long form content as podcasts, we are also going to be introducing some short to medium form content, and we have some good ideas, some good series available for y'all, and we're excited to work on it. So it's not going to be like a video like this, but it's going to be both of us working together, explaining topics, explaining our views, analyzing, deconstructing, all that good stuff. And right. I gotta say before we go on, I've been scratching my right eye a lot and like messing with it. I have a light right here, and it's only hitting this one eye.
So you're just getting roasted on just one side of your face.
Yeah.
Well, I hope you recover.
No, thank you. And also, like, we weren't able to go into like a super deep discussion on all the parts of 1984. We were just talking about a couple little points, but in explaining a lot of the book. But like, I mean, we didn't do it the book justice, so for
No, not
sure,
at all.
like think about it yourself, and read the book. And I really suggest that once you do read 1984, read Brave New World.
Awesome. That's a good suggestion. I need to reread Brave New World. It's been a long time. But yeah, no, definitely on all that. 1984 is obviously a cultural classic. I mean, I think everyone's, I'm sure, heard about it, but if definitely read it. It's poignant, and it's almost a direct correlation to whatever society you come from, whatever it is. Like, that's not going to change because human nature and whatnot. But yeah, definitely. Definitely had a mini earthquake there for a second. Definitely take a look at 1984 and yeah, come up with your own conclusions. That's always important. All right. So
challenge of the week.
Yes.
It's 2022.
Yep.
Now here's the question.
Hit me with it.
Why don't you own a cow?
Why don't I what?
Why don't you own a cow?
I don't think I'm allowed to where I live.
Well, shoot. Wait, are you in an HOA?
No, I'm not actually. But I'm in a neighborhood though.
Oh, I got you. Sorry. You're supposed to say because I don't have land. And I was going to say, a challenge of the week is to start thinking about what it would be like to have your own land in an off-grid cabin, possibly to escape from society.
Man, I messed it up. Well, it is a very good idea, though. I think offline we were talking a lot about that, and yeah, like I'd love to have the ability just to buy a little property and at least learn about what it means to be somewhat self-sustaining. Because yeah, I mean, I think most of us statistically live near the city, right? So if you're able to like dial it back and connect a little bit with nature, that's the goal, man. That's that you've made it at that point. So I should look into buying a cow now.
And it's, well, as we discussed with animal domestication, it's literally a walking meat machine.
You're not wrong. You're not wrong. And price of beef would go way down if you can make another cow. So,
very true.
All right. So challenge of the week, buy a cow is what I get from that.
Okay. Task failed successfully.
Yes. All right. Well, everybody, like, comment, subscribe, ring the bell, all that good stuff. Thanks for tuning into our podcast, and join us next week. We're gonna have I think a different format for you, and we're gonna change it up a little bit. So obviously let us know what you think, and keep it real.
Keep it real.
All right, guys. See ya.
See ya.